What's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and day one of the NFL Draft is officially in the books. And I'm here to grade every single first round pick, giving it an A+ or an F. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, and coming in with the number one overall pick, it was an obvious pick. It was Caleb Williams going to the Bears, and I gave this pick an A+. He's the best player in the draft. You have the first pick. Why not take the best player in the draft? I think Caleb Williams is going into a stacked offense there with the likes of DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift in the backfield, and the newly addition Rome Odunze, who we'll get to in a little bit. So the Bears really just set this guy up for, complete success. It's one of the best situations I've seen a quarterback go into in a long time, just with the weapons and the kind of just stability around him. I mean, the Bears are doing it right here, so, A+ for this pick. Moving on to number 2, we got Jaden Daniels, and I ended up giving him a B+. Not necessarily because I think it's a bad pick, but it's just like I would have much rather, if I was the GM, take Drake May. And I understand that Jaden Daniels is a little bit more of a scheme fit there with Cliff Kingsbury and such, but I mean, I just think Drake May is, probably more closer to Caleb Williams than he is to, Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, and those guys. So I think, they got the position right, and I still think Jaden Daniels is going to be a really good quarterback, but I would have just rathered a Drake May over a Jaden Daniels. Moving on to number 3, though, we do got Drake May going to the Patriots, and I give this an A pick because, it's probably the best option they could have went with if they wanted quarterback. Like I said, Drake May was my QB2, but I also was a little bit, hopeful that they would trade down here. I don't think their offense is ready to bring in a rookie quarterback. You need to get weapons surrounding your rookie quarterback, and the Patriots don't really have any. So I would have much rather the Patriots traded down, maybe got one of these top 3 receivers, and then, build their offense up a little bit before they brought in a rookie quarterback. They didn't end up doing that. They ended up taking Drake May, and like I said, I'm not disagreeing with it, but I just would have rather them traded down, but they took the best quarterback available to them. I can't really critique him too much. Moving on to number 4, we got the Arizona Cardinals taking Marvin Harrison Jr., and I give this an A+. He was the best player on the board. The Cardinals weren't in need of a quarterback, so really they got their pick of the entire draft. Alright, coming in at the 5th pick, we had the Chargers taking Joe Alt, and there was a lot of discourse on whether they should trade down or draft a wide receiver. I think those were the top 2 kind of, picks if you're a Chargers fan, and that didn't end up happening. You ended up getting the best offensive tackle we've seen in a while in Joe Alt. It's not the, the sexiest pick, but it's a pick that needed to be done. Jim Harbaugh loves running the ball, so you need to build up that offensive line. Now you have 2 really good offensive tackles with Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater. So, this is a home run of a pick. Would it have been nice to get a Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze to help Justin Herbert out? Of course. But this is a super deep wide receiver class. There's guys like A.D. Mitchell still on the board in day 2. So if the Chargers really want to, they can get an A.D. Mitchell, a Ladd McConkey, someone like that in round 2. And that would be an amazing pick for him. Moving on to number 6, we got my favorite team taking Malik Neighbors, the wide receiver out of LSU. And I wanted to give this an A+ pick just because this is what I was hoping for, but I can't quite give it an A+. I'm a bit of a strict grader. How the board fell, this is the best possible option. I think the Giants could have went. They need talent on that receiving core. You got good complementary pieces in a Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, a Darius Slayton, but you don't have that guy for Daniel Jones to throw to. And I think Malik Neighbors can be that guy, and I think he's going to thrive in this Brian Daboll offense. Moving on next, we got the Tennessee Titans selecting J.C. Latham, the right tackle out of Alabama. And I knew that J.C. Latham was getting a lot of hype leading up to the draft, the past week or so, that he could be going, top 10. He could be OT1 even, but he ended up being an offensive tackle too. But, there's multiple offensive tackles I like a little bit more than J.C. Latham. I understand the fit here. He's a right tackle and he can just kick right over to right tackle with ease, but whether they wanted to go Marvin Harrison or if they wanted to get the best offensive tackle on their board, best defensive player on the board, they could have done that here. And they could have also traded down, but with the top 3 quarterbacks going 1, 2, and 3, I think that kind of affected which teams wanted to trade up at that point. So the Cardinals ended up sticking a pick and taking Marvin Harrison Jr., and I mean, it's an A+ pick. I think Marvin Harrison Jr.'s got the potential to be a top 10 quarterback after his rookie season. So, A+ pick there, best non-quarterback in the draft by a good amount. I don't know. With guys like, Talise Fuanga, who I think is a better right tackle in this draft, or even guys like Olu Fashanu and Trey Fatanu, who are left tackles, but I mean, the Titans need both. It's not like they just needed a right tackle. They needed a tackle. They needed a offensive lineman. And I just don't think J.C. Latham was the best available option. But that's not to say I don't like J.C. Latham. I still think he was a first-round pick, easily. There's just a few other guys I'd much rather the Titans picked. But, don't worry. It's not the worst pick of the draft, because this next pick is absolutely terrible, with the Atlanta Falcons taking Michael Penix Jr., the quarterback out of Washington. There's no discussion here. I'll get into what I think the Falcons were thinking, but regardless, this is an F grade, complete F, fail. I think the Falcons were thinking that they could pull a Jordan Love type of situation, a Patrick Mahomes, where you sit a quarterback for a year or two, let him develop under a more established quarterback, and then hopefully he'll thrive once he takes over But when you think about it, you just signed Kirk Cousins this offseason. He hasn't even played a snap for you. You signed him 4 years, $100 million. What do you think it's going to look like to him when you go ahead and draft another quarterback who a lot of people were saying is one of the most pro-ready quarterbacks in the draft? You draft him at number 8. That's going to create a little bit of a, murky quarterback room, if you ask me. And even if that doesn't happen, Kirk Cousins is going to be playing for, you would think, at least 2 of those 4 years. Probably 3. So that's 3 years of Michael Penix, who, mind you, isn't the youngest prospect. He's already 23, going to be 24 his rookie season, and he has his fair share of injury concerns. I just don't understand it. By the time Michael Penix, takes over the quarterback position, once Kirk Cousins is gone, he's going to be like 27. A 27-year-old quarterback making his first, real start. Like, I don't know. If you're going to do this, J.J. McCarthy's still on the board. He is the developmental quarterback in this draft. Michael Penix is the pro-ready quarterback. Why would you take the pro-ready quarterback and sit him for a few years? Take J.J. McCarthy, who's, 2-3 years younger and is, has a higher ceiling. I don't understand it. I don't understand the quarterback pick in general. But if they were going to go quarterback, why did you go Michael Penix when J.J. McCarthy's still on the board? I don't get it. You could have had, the best edge rusher on your board here. You could have took Rome Odunze. You could have went offensive line. You could have went Brock Bowers and paired him up with Kyle Pitts. Like, I don't know. Any pick would have been better than this. I don't know. It's an F grade for me. Moving on, we had the Bears selecting Rome Odunze at number 9. This is an A pick. Bears fans were in love with this pick leading up to the draft. And getting Caleb Williams, a top quarterback prospect, and pairing him with one of the top wide receiver prospects in this draft, that's instant chemistry right there. Not to mention, once he gets to Chicago, he's going to have Keenan Allen, an established, proven wide receiver, and another really good wide receiver in DJ Moore. The Bears probably have the best, 3 wide receiver core. So realistically, this is a home run of a pick. And I know the Bears could have went, defense and gotten a Dallas Turner, a Jared Verse, a Quinion Mitchell, a Terrion Arnold. I understand that, but, making sure your rookie quarterback succeeds is number 1 priority for a franchise. And I think that's what the Bears are doing a really, really good job of. So an A pick for Rome Odunze. Moving on, we had the Vikings trading 1 spot with the Jets to go ahead and get J.J. McCarthy. So they didn't end up having to give up their second first-round pick. They were able to keep both their first-round picks and still get, presumably, their guy in J.J. McCarthy. I really like that idea. I wasn't the biggest fan of them trading up with, say, the Cardinals or the Chargers and taking J.J. there and giving up their second first-round pick. But being able to basically keep both your picks, I know they traded up, but it was a, later-round pick. Doesn't necessarily matter. So, they got their quarterback of the future in J.J. McCarthy. You'd love to see that. I wasn't the biggest J.J. McCarthy guy. I think he's, a bit of a question mark. He's definitely a developmental guy, but, it's a risk. But it's a risk you got to take when you're a quarterback needy team with, a potential Hall of Fame receiver just waiting there with, basically nobody at quarterback. So you had to make this move. and I'm just glad that they didn't have to give up, a ton of trade capital in order to make this work. Moving on, we had the New York Jets trading back one pick and taking Olu Fashanu, the offensive tackle out of Penn State. And I know Jets fans probably didn't love this pick. You got Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses, both, aging tackles with, injury histories. So I was a big fan of this pick. I was saying this in my mock drafts leading up that, both your tackles are probably not going to stay healthy the whole season. Just chances are one of them is going to get injured with their, injury issues. So why not get your insurance policy in a Olu Fashanu? He doesn't have to start right away. I suppose you could maybe try him at, guard, but I don't really know about that one. But he's going to be there. You got to have Aaron Rodgers protected all season. He's coming off an Achilles injury. So if one of your guys goes down, you're screwed. But not anymore, because you drafted a really, really good offensive tackle in Olu Fashanu to step in when one of those guys gets injured. So I like this pick a lot. I give it a B- just because I would have preferred maybe a Talise Fuanga or a Troy Fatanu over an Olu Fashanu. But either way, I like the offensive tackle pick in general. Moving on, we had the Broncos selecting Bo Nix with their first round pick, and he's the 6th quarterback off the board. And when you take QB6 at number 12, I don't know about that one. You could have gotten a really good defender. Again, no defenders off the board yet, and this is pick 12. So you could have got your pick of an edge rusher, a defensive tackle, a cornerback, and then just waited till next season to get your quarterback. I much rather would have gotten QB 2 or 3 in next year's draft than QB 6 in this draft. I know supposedly next year's quarterback class isn't that great, but I'm pretty sure QB 2 or 3 is going to be better than QB 6 here. So I'm not the biggest fan of this, but I do like Bo Nix's fit in the Sean Payton system. That's kind of like the saving grace here. I ended up giving it a C just because I think it's a bit of an average pick. I would have rather of them gone probably defense here and then pray that Bo Nix falls to the second round. If not, get a Spencer Rattler in day 2 or 3 and then, just wait until next season. But, they got their guy in Bo Nix. I think he's a good fit. It's just a bit of a meh pick for me. Moving on, we had a bit of a weird pick in my opinion with the Las Vegas Raiders taking Brock Bowers. I was a really big fan of Michael Mayer the year before, and they got him in the second round last year. Again, you could have got your pick of any defensive player, and you ended up going Brock Bowers. I think that the Raiders are in need of defense, whether that's cornerback. I think they could use an extra edge rusher, even though I know they got Tyree Wilson last year. Or you could have got a Byron Murphy or a Jerzon Newton. I would have liked that as well. I don't really understand the pick. I love Brock Bowers. I just don't like the fit, so that's why I ended up giving it a B-. But I guess you got to get Gardner Minshew some weapons to throw to, and Brock Bowers is a weapon, but I don't know. I just don't really like the fit. A little bit disappointed as just an NFL fan that he's going to Las Vegas. Moving on, we had Talise Fuanga going to the New Orleans Saints, and we knew from the beginning of the offseason that the Saints needed an offensive tackle, and they didn't necessarily address it in free agency. So, they really had no choice but to go offensive tackle here, and they ended up taking the best available offensive tackle in Talise Fuanga, in my opinion. Him and Troy Fatanu were, neck and neck, but I like Troy Fatanu a little bit better. I like Talise Fuanga a little bit better. So, they solved one of their offensive tackle issues. I'm assuming he's going to be replacing Trevor Penning there at left tackle. Maybe you're sliding Ryan Ramczyk to left tackle. I'm not too sure yet, but, with Trevor Penning being a bust and Ryan Ramczyk having knee problems, you got to get an offensive tackle, and Talise Fuanga was probably the best available on their board. So I give it a B+, not quite an A yet, just because I don't really know where he's going to play at, whether he's going to have to move over to left tackle or he can stay at his natural position at right tackle. Moving on to 15, we finally got our first defensive player off the board here at 15, and it was the Colts taking Laiatu Latu. Now, I think Laiatu Latu is the most talented defensive player in the draft. The only concerns I had was obviously he had neck problems, he was forced to medically retire, didn't necessarily know which teams were going to have him off their board completely, which teams were going to have him a little bit lower because of it. It ended up that the Colts were, I assume, fine with the neck problems, and they took him with their first round pick, and they had him over guys like Dallas Turner, Jared Verse. They could have used a Quinton Mitchell, Terry, and Arnold. They chose him over them, so he was their guy, and I think he's the best skill-wise. I think he's the best edge rusher in this class. they got him. So I mean, it's a B pick for me. I much rather would have seen them go at Brian Thomas here. Getting Anthony Richardson some weapons. I would have loved if Brock Bowers fell to him. But I mean, Leatu Latu's a good pick. I'm not mad at it, but I also don't love it. Moving on, we had the Seattle Seahawks taking Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle out of Texas. And, this was a surprising pick for me. With Troy Fautanu still on the board, I think that's what everyone was thinking that the Seahawks were going to do, just to, slide him into guard and just have a really, really good offensive line for next year. They ended up passing on Troy Fautanu and taking Byron Murphy. I mean, building up that defensive line is also a bit of a need for him. They don't really have anyone special on that defensive line, especially on the interior. So, getting, in their opinion, the best defensive tackle on the board, good pick. I wish they would have went Jerzon Newton. If they picked Jerzon Newton here, the C grade probably would have moved up to at least a B grade. So I like the defensive tackle pick, just not necessarily the player that they picked. Much rather a Jerzon Newton there. Moving on, we had the Vikings trading up with the Jacksonville Jaguars and selecting Dallas Turner. I mean, I like this pick a lot. It was a bit of a surprise when I seen it happen, just because I would have assumed they would have traded up for a guy like Byron Murphy just because they need defensive tackle help. But they did lose out on Danielle Hunter in free agency, so they needed an edge rusher to replace him. Dallas Turner is a great option. Not necessarily the same player as a Danielle Hunter, but the talent is there with Dallas Turner. He might need a little bit of refinement, develop counter moves and stuff like that, but he's got all the traits to become a really, really good edge rusher. So I think he was worth trading up for, and I gave it an A grade just because I think he could develop really nicely in that Vikings defense. Moving on, we have the Cincinnati Bengals taking Amarius Mims, the developmental tackle out of Georgia. And I think this was a borderline perfect pick for the Bengals. They signed Trent Brown to a 1-year deal. He's not going to be their replacement forever. Why not get a really good developmental tackle in Amarius Mims, have him learn for a year, and then hopefully take over at that right tackle or even left tackle position, after next year. I think this is a really good pick. I ended up giving it an A- just because, they could have went Troy Fautanu here, but I like the developmental pick a little bit, but, I do think Troy Fautanu was the better pick, so I like the tackle pick. I was a really big fan of Amarius Mims throughout the whole draft process, so I like the pick a lot. Moving on to 19, we had the Los Angeles Rams taking Jared Verse, the edge rusher out of Florida State. And I've been saying this whole time, especially once Aaron Donald retired, that they need to just take the best player available on their board on the defensive side of the ball. And if that was Jared Verse for him, good on you. Could they have went maybe a Jerzon Newton or getting one of the first cornerbacks, whether that's a Quinion Mitchell, Terrion Arnold, Nate Wiggins? Yeah, they could have done that as well, but I really like the Jared Verse pick, pairing him up with Byron Young up on the other side. That's a bit of a thunder and lightning combo. I ended up giving it a B grade. Moving on, we had the Steelers taking maybe one of the steals of the draft and Troy Fautanu. I gave this an A grade. Probably could have bumped this up to an A+. I'm a little bit stingy with my A+s, I guess. The Steelers probably were not expecting Troy Fautanu to fall to him here, but he ended up falling, so I'm pretty sure they just ran to the podium to get him. They need offensive tackle help. Will he replace Dan Moore at left tackle right away? Or maybe right tackle, whichever one? Maybe. If not, you can kick him into guard for a year and he could be, an all-pro guard for you. Regardless, he's a really good player. He's going to play somewhere on that offensive line year one, and he's going to play really good, so I had to give it an A grade. Moving on, we had the Miami Dolphins taking Chop Robinson. And looking at it now, I do think I'm a little bit harsh with this D grade. I wasn't the biggest fan. I would have much rather a Graham Barton or a Jackson Powers Johnson here, just because the Dolphins need offensive line help pretty badly. But, they also needed edge rush help. Chop Robinson's, not the most polished guy in the world. I don't think he's going to be insanely productive, but he doesn't really have to be there at Miami. He's going to be more of a rotational guy, so, maybe a bit harsh with that D grade. Maybe I could bump that up to in the C range, but either way, not the biggest fan. I'd much rather them have went Graham Barton or Jackson Powers Johnson. Moving on, we had the Eagles taking Quinion Mitchell, the first cornerback off the board. I had to give it a B+ just because the Eagles needed cornerback help, and they, there was rumors all week that the Eagles were looking to trade up, presumably to get a cornerback. And with the offensive run to begin the draft, all the cornerbacks ended up falling right into their lap, and they had their choice of the cornerback. They ended up going Quinion Mitchell. I think Quinion Mitchell or Terran Arnold would have been the right pick here. And I mean, I even would have loved a Cooper DeJean here. I know he didn't even go in the first round, but I thought he was a really good fit for the Eagles. Either way, they got their guy in Quinion Mitchell. I like it a lot. I maybe would have slightly preferred a Terrion Arnold here, but, it's a coin toss for me, really. So, B plus pick for me. Moving on, we had the Jacksonville Jaguars taking Brian Thomas Jr. I had to give this a B plus. They were able to trade back, get a little bit of trade capital, and still get their guy, Brian Thomas Jr. I really love this. You gotta get Trevor Lawrence some, weapons to throw to. So ideally, he takes that next step into superstardom because he's on the verge of being a really good quarterback. He's just not quite there yet. Calvin really didn't necessarily work out in Jacksonville, but I think Brian Thomas will. He's a big, strong, physical receiver with really good speed. Pairing him up with Gabe Davis and then Christian Kirk in the slot. At this point, Trevor Lawrence has got to, take that next step with Brian Thomas here. I think I've been saying that he's a little bit more of an elite wide receiver 2 than a wide receiver 1. But, I mean, there in Jacksonville, he might develop into that wide receiver 1 there. I like that pick a lot, B+. Moving on, we had the Detroit Lions trading up with the Dallas Cowboys and selecting Terrion Arnold, the cornerback out of Alabama. I really, really like this pick. I mean, I never really had this happening in any of my mock drafts, but I really think Terrion Arnold's a Dan Campbell guy, and they need cornerback help now that Cameron Sutton's gone, and, they went on and traded for the cornerback from Tampa Bay, but they still need cornerback help pretty badly. Terrion Arnold's a Dan Campbell guy for me. I gave it an A grade. I love it a lot. Moving on to the Packers selecting Jordan Morgan. I mean, Jordan Morgan was around 34, 35 on my big board, so selecting him here at 25 isn't the biggest reach in my opinion. But if you were going to take offensive lineman, why would you not take Graham Barton? Assuming Jordan Morgan is going to kick in a guard for him, I mean, you got a way better guard in my opinion than a Graham Barton. You could have went Jackson Powers Johnson and kicked him out to guard. You could have done a little bit more with this pick in my opinion. Maybe they like the tackle flexibility a little bit more on Jordan Morgan than they did a guy like Graham Barton. But either way, I don't know. I'm not the biggest Jordan Morgan guy. I ended up giving this a D grade, although maybe a bit harsh in my opinion. Moving on, we had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going Graham Barton, who we were just talking about, and I really like this pick. I ended up giving it a B. I really thought this was going to be a defensive pick, especially with guys like Nate Wiggins and Cooper DeJean still on the board. Ended up going offensive line, help protect Baker Mayfield. Can't be mad at it. I'm never going to necessarily critique a good offensive line pick, and I think that's what Graham Barton is a good offensive lineman with, tackle flexibility, guard flexibility, and even center flexibility. You play all over that offensive line, and I think that's what the Bucs need, so, I give it a B. Moving on, we had the Cardinals taking Darius Robinson here at 27. I wasn't ever the biggest Darius Robinson fan going in the first round. Still got guys like Jerzon Newton I'd much rather them have taken. You could have gotten who else is on the board. I mean, Marshawn Nealon, possibly, although Darius Robinson and Marshawn Nealon, they're a bit neck and neck for me. I don't hate the pick, but I don't know. I really like Jerzon Newton, and I'm a little bit salty that he didn't go in the first round. If this was Jerzon Newton, I would have loved it. Don't necessarily hate the Darius Robinson pick, but, not the most fancy pick in the world. But you know what is a fancy pick? That's the Kansas City Chiefs trading up with the Buffalo Bills of all teams, their rival, and getting Xavier Worthy, the absolute speedster out of Texas. And we were saying last draft class with maybe a Jalen Hyatt that, the Chiefs could go Jalen Hyatt and get their Tyreek Hill replacement. No, they got their Tyreek Hill replacement in this year's draft in Xavier Worthy. Breaking the 40-yard dash record with a 4.21. I mean, I think it's a really good pick. Did I think Xavier Worthy was a first-round talent? No, but if he's going to the Chiefs, then yes. I give it a B+, and I was close to giving it an A-. Not the biggest Xavier Worthy guy, but with Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball and Andy Reid's offense, that automatically makes it a much better pick than it would have been if he would have went to even the Bills here. I mean, I think there's better receivers on the board here. Guys like A.D. Mitchell, maybe even an Xavier Legette, but I don't know. It fits the Chiefs' offense so well. Him and Marquise Brown are going to torch defenses. It's going to be amazing to watch. Moving on, we had the Dallas Cowboys taking Tyler Guyton, the offensive tackle out of Oklahoma. I ended up giving it a C+. I thought they should have addressed more of their interior. Tyler Smith is going to kick out to, I assume, left tackle. I guess you could kick him out to right tackle, have him play alongside Zach Martin. But I much rather would have seen a Jackson Powers Johnson here. I mean, you lost Tyler Biotish to free agency. You need a center, and Jackson Powers Johnson is one of the best center prospects I've scouted in a little bit. So, I don't know. I like the offensive pick here. Not the biggest Tyler Guyton guy, but having him develop on that Cowboys offensive line is a little bit better than if he would have went to another team. So, I don't know, a bit of a down the middle pick here, C+. They were able to trade down to get a little bit more trade capital, so you like to see that as well. So, I don't know. It's a good pick. I'm not trying to be a biased Giants fan. I mean, it's a good pick. Moving on to number 30, we had the Ravens taking Nate Wiggins. I like this pick a lot. They needed secondary help pretty badly. I mean, they have Marlon Humphrey, but he's not always the most healthy guy in the world. And they don't really have no one to, go alongside Marlon Humphrey. So getting Nate Wiggins, who, has his question marks, not the heaviest guy in the world, isn't really going to provide much in the run defense game, but, he's a lockdown corner, a potential number one corner for a team, and getting him at 30 is a really good steal in my opinion. Moving on, we have the San Francisco 49ers making a bit of a surprise going Ricky Pearsall here. Now, I get the wide receiver pick. I was kind of predicting that with all the Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk trade rumors going around. But with Xavier Legette still on the board, A.D. Mitchell still on the board, I mean, I don't know. I can't give it more than a C- just because of the receivers that they passed up on to go Ricky Pearsall. I think A.D. Mitchell would have been a really good Brandon Ayuk replacement. A.D. Mitchell is a bit of a bigger guy, but is also really nuanced in his route running. Ricky Pearsall is a bit of a smaller guy, a really good route runner, but doesn't provide much after the catch. So I don't know. I really like Ricky Pearsall, but with A.D. Mitchell still on the board and Xavier Legette, Ladd McConkey, just not necessarily the receiver I would have picked for the 49ers. And then moving on to the last pick in the draft, we had the Buffalo Bills trading down once again, one pick, so the Carolina Panthers traded up into day one and took Xavier Legette, the receiver out of South Carolina. It was rumored for a few weeks now that the Panthers really, really loved Xavier Legette, so, they traded one pick into day one and got their guy in Xavier Legette. Again, A.D. Mitchell is somehow still on the board here. I don't understand how that's possible. So that's why I ended up giving it a B because, in my opinion, if I was the Panthers, I wouldn't have thought that A.D. Mitchell would still be on the board here. So, I would have liked to see them maybe call an audible, trade up and get A.D. Mitchell instead of Xavier Legette. But either way, getting Bryce Young help and just improving that offense in general is a really good idea in my opinion. So I like the pick. Would have been an A+ pick if it was A.D. Mitchell. That's the only, critique I have. But that's going to do it. Let me know what you think of my grades and what you would grade certain picks down in the comments below. If you liked the video, consider subscribing. And as always, I'm the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.